On behalf of the Center for the Study of Ethics, I would like to welcome you to our Student Ethics Symposium. This year's symposium has the title, Conspiracy Theories and Their Social Implications. And it's especially exciting to be able to feature the work that students have been doing throughout the school year. And in a normal year, we would just have a variety of different papers. But this year is a little bit special where we were able to have a focused theme because we have a group of students presenting today that have been working as part of a semester-long seminar on conspiracy theories in American history, led by Dr. Robert Goldberg, who is standing over there in a nondescript fashion. Bob has been doing stellar work with students as a visiting scholar in the Center for the Study of Ethics. Some of you know Bob as the longtime director of the Tanner Humanities Center at the University of Utah. And he is recently retired and now has the title of Professor Emeritus of History at the U of U. We're just delighted to have Bob on our campus. He's a friend of UVU, he's a friend of mine. He's also on the Community Advisory Board for a project that we've been working on campus called the Appomattox Project, which focuses on dialogue, diversity, civility, right, and other related issues. So it's been a delight to work with Bob. It's been a delight to work with the students. I want to publicly thank the staff of the Center for the Study of Ethics for all of their good work, and especially to Nathan Tucker. Nathan, you'll hear from in just a moment. Nathan is a research assistant in the Ethics Center, and he's been working alongside Bob to help these students with their presentations. So without further ado, I will turn the time over to Bob for just a couple of minutes to describe the seminar in more broad terms, and then we'll jump right into the presentations. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Brian Birch, first of all, from the Center for the Study of Ethics for hosting this symposium and creating the fellowship program that underwrote the symposium. I'd also like to thank Nathan Tucker, the king of logistics, the hardest part of this program for today. Thank you so much for all you've done. Today, UVU research scholars will present papers that originated in our seminar on conspiracy thinking in American history. We have studied visions of conspiracies, plots, subversions, and cover-ups. Such images, such claims, such ideas are prominent, a persistent and continuous theme in American history from the very beginning to today. Conspiracy theorists attempt to reveal the dark side, the hidden side, the powerful forces that seek to undermine American society and American culture, to destroy our freedom, our democracy, our nation itself. Such diabolical groups neglect no tactic, neglect no lever in a quest for power and wealth. Revolution, war, depression, disease, election fraud are alleged to be their means for control and domination. If that is the threat, conspiracy theorists seek to expose, to reveal, and to defeat the danger. Today, you will learn about a series of conspiracy theories. Secret combinations from the Book of Mormon and Ezra Taft Benson. The 3% militias. Alex Jones and the Sandy Hook murders. Anti-vaxxers in the age of COVID. Satanic panics. QAnon. The Wuhan, China lab leak accusations. And the butterfly conspiracy. Our purpose in this class and our purpose in this seminar today is not to disprove, not to dismiss, and not to mock the conspiracy theories, but rather to take them seriously and to understand them, the who, what, where, when, and why of conspiracy thinking. We ask, who teaches us to believe in conspiracy theories? How do theorists weave events into plots? How are conspiracy theories transmitted? Why do people believe? And finally, what is the implication? What is the impact of conspiracy theories on American society? In all of this, note the disparity, diversity of plots and claims and targets. And note also at the same time, conspiracy theories whittle away at the trust we have in our leaders, our institutions, and the very future of this country. At this point, I think we should begin.
So hi, I'm Nathan Tucker. It's my honor to introduce two of our students from the conspiracy seminar. Tyson Gunther, who you'll be hearing from first, is a senior majoring in both economics and philosophy here at UVU. He'll be presenting on interviewing the Three Percenter movement. And Sydney Creer is also a senior, and she'll be presenting majoring in humanities. She will be presenting on secret combinations, conspiracy thinking, and Mormon thought. So we'll have both presentations following each other, and we will have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A for both presentations. So Tyson?
All right, can everybody hear me? Better?
Yes.
Thank you. Put this on. I hope that the camera can hear me as well. Okay. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Bob, for all of your help and your mentoring. Today, I will be presenting on the Three Percenter movement and the research I've been doing there. To start out, let's go back to February 1993. In this month, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, secured a warrant to search the Branch Davidian compound outside Waco, Texas for illegal firearms and to arrest their leader, David Koresh. The same month, roughly 70 ATF agents stormed the Davidian compound and were met with gunfire. The gunfight led to the ATF withdrawing from the compound. In response, federal agents and the U.S. military put the compound under siege for 51 days. The siege ended in April when the Davidians set fire to the compound. Altogether, nearly 80 people died from either the fire or gunfights. Many Second Amendment activists pointed to this event as government overreach, and evidence that the government wanted to cast aside the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. This event became a rallying cry, serving as a catalyst for the formation of several militia groups. One man, Michael Vanderboe, in response to Waco, formed a militia known as the Sons of Liberty. Vanderboe remained active in the militia movement throughout the 1990s. More than a decade later, in 2008, Vanderboe co-founded a new militia, known as the Three Percenters. In 2014, Vanderboe, in response to the Clive and Bundy Ranch standoff, wrote that what has come to be known as the 3% Doctrine, which reads, "The 3% idea, being an idea, is internalized and finds expression in action when required without any top-down organization issuing orders." This was on perfect display at the Bundy Ranch standoff when the Three Percenters from everywhere flocked on their own to the Bundys' defense, interposing themselves between the Bundys and the feds. No call was issued. They just came and they understood the concept of no more free Wacos. The feds were shocked, first into inaction, then into retreat. Indeed, the Bundy confrontation may be seen as the proof of the successful weaponizing of the idea of the 3%. The number and size of groups referring to themselves as Three Percenters grew steadily from 2008 to 2016. Between 2016 and 2020, the movement saw a significant decrease. Despite the decrease, it is only in the last several years that groups gained any significant media attention. This, combined with their consistent presence at controversial events, makes 3%ers a subject of great academic interest. The purpose of my research is to answer the following questions. Who are the members of the 3% groups? Why did they join the movement? What are their beliefs and aspirations? Are they right-wing white supremacists? Are minorities welcome within their groups? Do they have revolutionary intentions? What is the role of conspiracy thinking within their groups? And how are these groups organized? To answer these questions, I conducted 5 interviews with former and current leaders of 3% groups. I conducted and recorded all interviews via phone call in February and March of this year. Initially, I came in contact with 3%ers through an acquaintance of mine who was previously a state leader for a 3% group. He was able to connect me with multiple leaders across the country. To provide a brief demographic overview of the interviewees, 2 interviewees come from Tennessee, 1 from West Virginia, 1 from Texas, and 1 from New York City. All 5 were white. Only 1 was a woman. Their ages range from 35 to 51, with an estimated average for age of 40. 4 of the 5 considered themselves Christians, though at least 2 of those who identify as Christian do not belong to any denomination. 2 have some college education. At least 4 are parents. None of the interviewees identified with any political party. However, most identify as having libertarian sympathies. Only 1 is a military veteran. Based on one interviewee's estimate, this appears to be representative of the majority in the movement. While there is some variation in their ideology, there are 2 clear points that they all share. The first is their dedication to a specific interpretation of the United States. From this dedication emerges their primary goal, to preserve the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. All other goals are secondary. The second point all share is the imperative of preparedness. All 5 believe they must be prepared for a number of possible events, from natural disaster to civil war. These 2 points may at first appear disconnected. However, for 3%ers, the 2 are inseparable. The very thing they are preparing for is for tyranny, the dissolution of the Constitution, and the fallout from such an event. To achieve their goals, 3%ers employ a range of tactics, from offering classes on the Constitution to armed protests and paramilitary training. While an exhaustive review of their activities would be impossible in this setting, consider some activities that were somewhat common among the interviewees. Lobbying efforts. At least 3 of those interviewed engaged in lobbying activities with their groups. There are 2 notable examples that showcase the extent of their lobbying efforts. First, one interviewee and his group, American Patriot 3%, or simply AP3, worked with county sheriffs to create Second Amendment sanctuary counties. The interviewee referred to these sheriffs as constitutional sheriffs, by which he means sheriffs that will not enforce laws they deem to be unconstitutional. Second, one interviewee discussed his group's role in initiating what are referred to as constitutional carry laws. These are laws which permit a person to carry a firearm openly or concealed without a permit. His group, 3% Republic, worked with lawmakers in West Virginia to write a law which ultimately passed in West Virginia's Congress. This law served as the basis for similar laws in 7 other states. Emergency preparedness and relief. Most, if not all, of these groups engage in emergency preparedness activities by creating 72-hour kits, canning food, and even taking or teaching classes on primitive survival. Additionally, it is common for 3% groups to assist in disaster relief efforts, such as tornado relief and volunteering to fight wildfires. Armed protests and paramilitary training. All interviewees and their groups participated in armed protests. These protests include the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, a 2017 protest in New Orleans, a counter-protest at the Gettysburg Memorial Cemetery, and counter-protests in Washington State. All interviewees engage in paramilitary training by running drills, practicing small unit movement tactics, and practicing at the shooting range. While the list of activities is far more extensive than this, these examples serve to show that the diverse activities they engage in. Perhaps one of the most interesting findings from these interviews was the common belief that some form of revolution or civil war was inevitable. Only one interviewee believed such an event is not inevitable. Most firmly believe that these events will be in response to tyranny, and that tyranny is inevitable. One might ask 3%ers what will cause tyranny or a loss of freedom. Here they respond with several different answers. Most believe it is a product of human nature. Either people become complacent due to the luxury they enjoy, or human greed drives a free society towards tyranny. One interviewee believes that a deep state is driving the world towards a new world order, a global socialist tyranny. So they believe that by complacency, greed, or conspiracy, freedoms secured by the Constitution will be swept away, and in its place, only some form of tyranny will remain. Once tyranny is established, only revolution can restore liberty. One interviewee captured this idea best when he paraphrased Thomas Jefferson. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. The exception to this perspective is the leader of the group known as the Bureau of Islamic American Relations, or BEAR for short. This interviewee does not believe tyranny or civil war is inevitable. Oddly enough, this perspective seems to make him far louder and more active. Indeed, this group has by far the most media attention of any group I interviewed. While this interviewee does not believe that tyranny is inevitable, he does firmly believe that radical Islam and Sharia are a threat to the Constitution. It is his belief that as radical Islam gains influence within the United States, the liberties by the Constitution will be eroded from community to community. Another insight that comes from these interviews is how 3% groups organize themselves. These groups range widely in terms of scope, size, and decision-making. One interviewee who was in leadership in 2 different groups provides an in-depth view of how these groups were organized. The first group, the 3%er Originals, organized with national, zone, state, and county leadership. The national leadership consisted of the leader and his immediate auxiliaries. The country was then divided into zones based on FEMA's emergency response zones. This was done so that members and leaders of a zone could quickly respond to events occurring within their zones. Decisions were made in a top-down fashion where the leader's word was law. The interviewee describes this group as a dictatorship. In contrast, the interviewee's second group, the 3% Republic, made decisions in a bottom-up democratic manner. As the name suggests, this group organized with division of powers and checks and balances. The 3% Republic is also divided into national, zone, state, and county leadership. In contrast to these groups that were highly organized, some groups, such as American Warrior Revolution, were more loosely organized. This group had no clear leadership. Decisions were made by popular vote. Instead of national leadership, the group was organized by a national group and then state groups. Those in state groups were typically also a part of the national group. This national group would make and execute plans, but states also had significant autonomy to make and execute their own plans. If individuals outside of a particular state participated in the state's activities, they would be expected to follow those states' plans and rules. Many groups were organized in this decentralized manner. Perhaps a surprising discovery revolves around 3%ers' relationship to Donald Trump. Of those interviewed, only one interviewee expressed any support for Trump. This interviewee's support for Trump comes in part due to his predisposition towards conspiracy thinking. In his own words, "I was a Trump supporter because I thought he brought to light a lot of the deep state stuff." However, in the same breath, this interviewee went on to explain how his trust in Trump deteriorated due to the COVID-19 mandates, and that happened during his presidency. Despite the overall lack of support for Trump, most of the interviewees remarked on how prevalent support for Trump within the 3% movement is. One of the interviewees even cited this increase in support for Trump as a primary reason for his leaving the movement. This seems to indicate that there is a deep split within the movement between those who support Trump and those who do not. Another finding from my research is the relationship between 3%ers and law enforcement. Some groups, such as AP3, defined themselves as pro-law enforcement. However, the leader of AP3 indicated that this perspective on law enforcement changed due to how they enforced COVID-19 restrictions. The leader of AP3 claims that most 3%er groups are very anti-law enforcement. Despite this claim, nearly everyone interviewed collaborated with law enforcement to some degree. Bear may be an extreme example of collaboration, where they worked with the FBI and Homeland Security to investigate problems they faced. According to the leader of Bear, their collaboration led to the arrests of 8 individuals. Another discovery from these interviews was just how interconnected these groups are. If one group organized an event, say a protest, one could expect that members from other 3% groups would join. All interviewees had personal connections with other interviewees. All interviewees also had connections with the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. In fact, the leader of the Proud Boys was previously a member of the 3% Republic. Mapping out their personal connections reveals a web, a network of individuals who collaborate with one another across the country. This discovery comes from interviewing just 5 individuals. The high degree of connection between these groups seems to indicate that this network is far more extensive than this. Despite this network, it would be a mistake to conclude that all interactions are positive, or that they are always united. On the contrary, many of the groups expressed frustration, even disdain for other 3% groups. The sheer number of splinter groups seems to paint a picture of conflict and dysfunction within the movement. One interviewee compared her experience as a leader in the movement with that of herding cats. A final discovery revolves around how active these groups are. Some groups claimed members of more than 500,000, while others only a few hundred. However, no group ever reported having more than 200 of their own members at any given event. The leader of AP3 also indicated that a large portion of the movement do little more than post their grievances with the government on Facebook. These he referred to as keyboard commandos, which seems an apt term. It seems that those members who actively participated in protests and paramilitary training probably ranged between a few dozen and perhaps a few thousand on the generous side. This activist core rallies around the leader and makes the movement a significant part of their identity. To wrap up the conclusion, the main points, main discoveries to look at is there appears to be little or no evidence of a connection of these groups to fundamentalist Christian values. This may be a surprise considering the connection that many other right-wing groups have with fundamentalist Christian values. Second, there's evidence of an extensive nationwide network of groups that collaborate with and support each other. Third, there's evidence of a deep division between those who support Trump and those who do not support Trump. This division is, at least to some extent, a cause for the decline of the movement. Perhaps most importantly, there's evidence that the primary motive within the movement is to ease the fear that they have over the erosion of liberty. Thank you.
And it works.
And it works. Does it? Okay, it does that. I don't know why I'm not able to. Do I have to? Oh, it's a little desktop 1, desktop 2 thing. Okay. I see. It's decided that this is like the other screen.
Beautiful.
There. Okay.
Thank you.
That's just,
Okay. Thank you. Like Nathan said, I'm Sydney Creer. I also want to thank Nathan, Bob, and Brian for helping me with my research and participating in this seminar. I'm going to be talking about secret combinations and anti-communist theory and thinking. This research identifies a conspiracy theory popular during the 1960s and 1970s among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The conspiracy warned of a war between God and government, patriots and conspirators. A key figure involved in this was an apostle, Ezra Taft Benson. He's a leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Benson vocalizing his views on communism and saw in it the dangerous secret combinations found in the scripture, the Book of Mormon, which define groups seeking power and the overthrow of legal governments. Benson claims that this can be seen in many societies throughout the world, specifically communism. In speaking about communism and also the devil or Satan's influence in communism, he says, as a wolf in supposedly a new suit of sheep's clothing is enticing some men both in and out of the church to parrot his line by advocating planned government guaranteed security programs at the expense of our liberties. Benson uses the Book of Mormon, the scripture that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their members read and study often, to compare secret combinations that are identified, like I said earlier, in the Book of Mormon to communism. In 1820, in New York, there was a young boy named Joseph Smith, and he talked of a vision of a book that needed translation. Smith believed that that a higher power called him for a purpose. He said he was led to a hill where he found a book written in gold plates. As Smith grew older, he sought help from this higher power to translate them. While translating the plates, he learned that they contained writings of ancient prophets in the Americas, which a man named Mormon had abridged and compiled. Similar to the Bible, this book told the stories of ancient peoples, their traditions, and their tribulations. This book is known as the Book of Mormon. After Smith's translation, he preached to the people the truthfulness of this book. He also helped others come to Christ, saying he believing by establishing Christ's church. When trials came to these early saints, Smith encouraged them to stand firm with the Book of Mormon, and he said, I told the brethren that the Book of Mormon was the most correct of any book on earth and the keystone of our religion, and a man would get nearer to God by abiding by its precepts than by any other book. Over 100 years later, Ezra Taft Benson said a similar thing. It is more important than the inventions that have come out of the industrial and technological revolutions. This is the gift of greater value to mankind than even the many wonderful advancements we have seen in modern medicine. It is of greater worth to mankind than the development of flight or space travel. Benson uses the Book of Mormon and early saints' beliefs and opinions on the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon to identify secret combinations in his time and in our time. Ezra Taft Benson was a very passionate man. He is from a very small town in Idaho called Whitney, Idaho, and he grew up on a farm. He studied farming and agriculture in school and later became the United States Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower. He, including that leadership position, was also, like mentioned before, an apostle in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and later became the president of the church, or the prophet of the church. He wasn't the only one who was on board with the idea that communism is a secret combination in the modern world. Other leaders agreed. Some didn't, but others did. And the prophet during the time, David OKeefe, said, "Today, two mighty forces are battling for the supremacy of the world. The destiny of mankind is in the balance. It is a question of God and liberty, or atheism and slavery." And so basically, Benson took it up to him, to the importance of this message and identifying it to members, non-members, that communism was a secret combination, and also it was seen throughout our own government. And Benson was the most vocal about it in the leadership. So let's dive in to some of the examples that he uses in the Book of Mormon to compare communism as a secret combination. One main factor is to note that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe that secret combinations are an old tradition. In the Book of Mormon, if you're not familiar with it, it is compiled like the Old and New Testaments. There's many books within the book itself. And in a book at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, in 2nd Nephi, it says, "And there are also secret combinations, even as in times of old, according to the combinations of the devil. For he is the founder of all these things, yea, the founder of murder and works of darkness. Yea, and he leaders them by the neck with a flaxen cord, until he bindeth them with his strong cords forever." We can identify some of these believed to be older secret combinations going back to the Bible in the Old Testament, starting with the creation of Adam and Eve, where Christians believe that Eve was tricked or tempted by the devil or Satan to partake of the forbidden fruit. Also, their children, Adam and Eve's children, Cain and Abel. Abel being seen as this righteous, almost perfect person, getting lots of praise and attention from it. Cain being frustrated with that attention not on him, and conversing with the devil or Satan, who then tricks or convinces Cain to kill his brother. There's also these stories in the Book of Mormon as well. At the end of the book, there's a book called Ether, which identifies a story of a young girl and her father who want power and are seeking more wealth and are looking to overthrow a government. And she comes up with this plan with her father when a young boy comes, and she seduces him, and he falls in love and wants to marry her, and goes and talks to her father to ask if he could marry her. And he said, "Yes, only if you bring me the head of the king." And being so in love and wanting to marry her, he and his people, his name is OKeefe, and his people make up a plan, go and kill the king and bring this daughter's father his head. The main group of people Benson uses to compare communism to are called the Gadianton robbers, being named after their leader Gadianton. In the book Helaman, it says, "For there was one Gadianton who was exceedingly expert in many words, and also in his craft to carry on the secret work of murder and of robbery. Therefore he became the leader of the band." Benson compares this to communism because the Gadianton robbers claim and hide and are looking to do away with Christianity during this time. They were not fans, I guess we can say, of Christian believers and wanted them not to be anymore. They would hide and they would kill these people, and their goal was to make it so people did not believe in Christ. Benson compares this to communism and uses his time in office under Eisenhower to explain his experiences and the way that he thought he saw communism in the government. He says, it is well to ask, Benson says, it is well to ask what system established secret works of darkness to overthrow nations by violent revolution, who blasphemously proclaimed the atheistic doctrine that God made us not. Satan works through human agents. We need only look to some of the ignoble characters in human history who were contemporary to the restoration of the gospel to discover fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. I refer to the infamous founders of communism and others who follow in their tradition. And Benson is also saying that the Constitution is threatened by communism. Let's see. Some of the people during this time did not agree with Benson. People outside the church, people in the church even, who did not agree with what Benson was saying. However, there were others, like I mentioned before, some leaders who agreed with what Benson was saying, and specifically one organization who firmly believed on what Benson was saying. They were an anti-communist organization called the John Birch Society. They favored Benson's words and were grateful to him to stand up for those who believed communism to be evil. There were many maybe problematic scenarios in with Benson's affiliation to the society or the organization, one being his promoting of the society to his fellow church members. Other church leaders ended up asking him not to promote the organization and also to not affiliate with the organization. And Benson did decide not to affiliate due to his church standing and his leadership. However, he still encouraged people that it was a good organization, and his family ended up affiliating with the organization as well. He had a son, and when he, I believe his name is Reed, affiliated or joined the society, he said, I would have given him equal encouragement if he had been considering the FBI. To end, I want to summarize the main points of this conspiracy, in which Benson, having leadership and a high standpoint in a political right-winged position and a leadership position in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he used both to promote the comparison and idea that communism is in fact a secret combination or an organization or practice that is wanting to overthrow or gain power from another group or individual. He says, no nation which has kept the commandments of God has ever perished, but I say to you that once freedom is lost, only blood, human blood, will win it back. And that's all I have, so thank you. Thanks.
Okay, we'll now have about 50 for Q&A.
You can raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you.
Do you want this as well?
I said, I wonder if you can tell us exactly what 3% means.
Yeah. So the name 3% comes from this myth And most of them recognize it as a myth, that during the Revolutionary War, only 3% of the American colonists were active in fighting the British. So that's where they come up with the name 3%. You do hear a lot of them claim that there's 3 million of them. So Vanderbilt himself claimed that there were 3 million people just like him.
This one's also for Tyson. I was just wondering, in your interviews, did you discuss at all, and did you find the answer to how the 3%ers kind of, they seem to be of the mind that there is tyranny and everything. Are they pro-government or anti-government, or what exactly is their stance on government? Because that's something I find confusing.
That's a good question. So if you look at like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, they define them as anti-government groups. All of them were very quick to tell me that they are not anti-government, they're pro-government, but the way they see it, it should be very confined to essentially just the letter of the Constitution.
I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. You mentioned an affiliate group that Ezra Taft Benson was in support of, and how it was viewed as problematic. I was curious, what are some of the reasons that it was controversial that he was affiliated with that group?
Great question. The group is called the John Birch Society. It is an anti-communist organization. I think the biggest, and that's something I should probably do a little bit more research on, but I think from what I've gathered, the biggest problem is Benson was claiming that communism was threatening the Constitution. At the same time, he was hoping and, what's a good word, trying to tell members of the church to join this organization. And the leaders within the church wanted the members to be able to choose for themselves if they wanted to join it, and that it wasn't a church-affiliated organization. Does that help? Thanks.
Sydney, I have a question for you as well. So I'm curious, which particular policies, practices, or like applications of communism Ezra Taft Benson found to be problematic both to Mormonism and to like his perception of American liberty?
Great question. Another one I would like to have a little more research in. Some of the things included his experiences and trips within talking to the other government leaders. One that I need to do a little bit more research on is with the civil rights movement. Benson saw it in some ways as a communist-inspired movement, and that is something I'd like to do more research on for sure. And then the other one, the main one, is with the John Birch Society and the anti-communist thinking in a way of trying to, I can't think of a good word, but I guess almost make members or people join that group. That would be a help.
Benson, could you tell us more about, you mentioned people in different movements aren't anti-government. I've often, maybe I'm generalizing, but there's usually a pro-military, so is that a big part of the pro-government aspects of these groups, that they see the military very large in the US as being one of the things that the government is doing well? Like, in their view, what is the government doing well right now, if anything?
What is it doing well?
Yeah.
So most of them claimed very adamantly that they don't trust the government at all. they might trust the individuals in the military, but I don't think you could say, I don't think they believe the government's doing anything well right now.
This is along the same lines about the military and in regards to my question before. How do they kind of marry the idea that, you know, like, they do support the military, but they're also afraid of the military, and that's why they want militia and everything? How do those two ideas go together? And how do they, like, how much do they support the military? I guess I don't know exactly how to word it, but what are their thoughts on military versus their fear of it?
It's complicated. So first of all, I think that most of them expressed isolationist ideas, so they tended to be against the U.S. military actions in the Middle East, for instance. And a lot of them, this is a little conjecture because I didn't go into this very deeply while interviewing them, but I think a lot of them believe if a civil war or revolution were to happen, that a lot of the military would be on their side.
Sydney, I wonder if you came across anything about this. So Robert Welch, who was the founder of the John Birch Society, accused Dwight Eisenhower, the President of the United States, and George Marshall, the Secretary of State, of being conscious members of a communist conspiracy. Later he talked about how communism and capitalism were united with the arms of an octopus in destroying American freedom. Did you come across anything in regard to David O. McKay or Ezra Taft Benson's opinions about those ideas?
I don't know if I have in specifically what Welch says about Eisenhower and some of the other leaders. I know that Benson had a strong relationship with Welch, but I don't know if I came across anything yet. I will with what they think about Eisenhower. I know Benson had some things to say that seemed similar to what Welch said with Eisenhower, even though he was working close with him. Nothing in regards to what Welch said.
Okay, last question.
What's the status of the John Birch Society today? Is it still in existence? Is it growing or shrinking?
Good question. I am actually not sure. I know with the impact on Benson's impact on today isn't as strong as it was during that time. As a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I had not heard about the John Birch Society until this semester. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, let's have a hand for our two presenters.